Today at the National Press Club, Minister for Skills and Training, Brendan O'Connor, a former Assistant National Secretary to the Australian Services Union, the Victorian MP, has served in the employment, home affairs and small business portfolios. Brendan O'Connor with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia for today's Westpac address. My name is David Crowe, the Chief Political Correspondent at the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, and a Director here at the Club. Our guest today is Brendan O'Connor, the Federal Minister for Skills and Training, a member of the Federal Cabinet and a member of the Labor front bench for many years in many portfolios. Skills could not be more topical right now, whether it's changing demand for them, the shortage of them, or the need to bring them in from overseas. Mr O'Connor is at the centre of the debate about skills, about how to ensure we have the skills we need, and he's negotiating a national skills agreement with the states to set up the next round of funding for vocational education and training. He's also a key member of the team that is about to outline some changes to education and migration policy in the next few days. We've already seen some early announcements, such as tightening of the rules in vocational education, being announced today. No doubt we'll hear more about the context for these changes in today's address. We're presenting today's address in the Club's main room, and we cannot be happier to be back after several weeks of renovations. It's a magnificent room, as you can see, totally refurbished. You might have noticed a little action on social media about this, because the building work meant some speakers had to make their addresses in a smaller room upstairs. Rest assured, this was purely because renovations take time, and it's not easy to tell builders to change their plans, even when there's a referendum on. We might even get to the subject of skills shortages during today. For those of you watching at home, you can join the conversation on Twitter, where our handle is @PressClubAust, or you can use the hashtag NPC. Please welcome Brendan O'Connor to the podium.
Well, thank you very much, David, for that introduction. It's fantastic to be here in this venue, I have to say. And look, it's in this momentous month for our nation, it is more important than ever to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we meet on, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us today. What a privilege it is for us to have as a central part of our national history and identity the oldest continuous living culture in the world. In just under 2 weeks, each of us will be given the opportunity to answer the generous invitation made at Uluru 6 years ago to walk together with First Nations Australians for a better future. The simple act of accepting that invitation by saying yes will make us an even better, more united country. It's exactly 50 years since the Whitlam government commissioned Maya Kangan to provide advice on the development of technical and further education in Australia. His report to the government established the foundations for a modern TAFE sector built on the traditions of our finest state technical schools and trade colleges, but with a vision for something bigger. The report made the link between vocational education and training and national prosperity, and for the first time, this link was comprehensively acknowledged by a Commonwealth government. Significantly, the report was tripartite. It brought together employers, unions and educators, state and territory governments. The report was of such seminal importance to Australia's national development that one of Australia's exceptional TAFE colleges bears the author's name. For the first time, significant Commonwealth funds were invested through grants to the states to build new technical colleges, create new and more facilities, and train new technical staff. It was the birth of Australia's modern vocational education sector. It was a moment of promise that should have created a great national skills training sector equal in status to our university sector, as is the case in many other countries. But if we're being honest, the policies of successive governments, federal and state, have cast TAFE, community providers and the vet sector adrift from its purpose of national prosperity. The vet sector has endured underfunding, deregulation, loose rules of vet market entry, a lack of national cohesion and an obsession for competition at the expense of collaboration. In the face of this neglect and policy missteps, the sector has performed admirably, but we can do better. And 50 years since Maya Kangan first conceived of a national TAFE sector, in 2023, we're restoring TAFE to the rightful place at the heart of vocational education and training. Having said all of that, it's still true to say that TAFE is one of our strongest national assets, despite the headwinds that it has faced. Every time I visit a TAFE or a community college or other vet providers for that matter, I'm encouraged by the passion of the teachers and the enthusiasm of the students. Upon election, however, not only was the Albanese government faced with $1 trillion of public debt, we were bequeathed one of the worst skill shortages, broad as it was deep, this country has experienced. I would contend a decade of Commonwealth dysfunction on skills policy was never going to help address severe skills shortages across the country. Our vocational education and training sector needed genuine ambition, investment and cooperation. And it needs champions. And that's exactly what it has in the Albanese government. Regardless of the challenges that we've inherited, we're determined to produce the reforms required. And it's also true that skilled migration will play a very significant role. And I'm working with Ministers Jason Clare, my co-collaborator, who's here today. Thanks for coming, Jason. Ministers Clare O'Neill and Andrew Giles to ensure the skills delivered by our education and training sectors are complemented by informed skilled migration pathways. Equally important will be reaching out to Australians currently underrepresented in the vocational education and training sector and ensuring they're supported to successfully complete their qualifications. And today I'd like to outline the key reform areas the Albanese government has embarked on to transform vocational education and training. A 5-year national skills agreement will be concluded before the end of this year. It is a reform agreement that will embed true collaboration in the interests of regional and national prosperity. The National Skills Agreement will create TAFE centres of excellence to increase the collaboration between universities and the vet sector and deliver the skills and knowledge our labour market and economy requires. It will accelerate higher and new degree apprenticeships to bridge the outdated divide between the vet sector and the university sector. We're driving qualifications reform to ensure qualifications are relevant, timely, portable and of high quality. We're improving foundation skills delivery to respond to the alarming statistic that 1 in every 5 adult Australians have skill gaps in literacy, numeracy and digital literacy. We're lifting apprenticeship completion rates and supporting more women, First Nations people and people from a range of backgrounds to access apprenticeships. We're progressing the vet workforce blueprint to support, attract and retain teachers and trainers. We are continuing to deliver fee-free TAFE and vet places to respond to the immediate needs of industry. We have established Jobs and Skills Australia, a tripartite expert body that will improve our capacity to plan the workforce needs of the future. Its work will be complemented by 10 new tripartite jobs and skills councils to ensure that government decisions are informed by real economy insight. And because more must be done to stop substandard and dodgy vet providers, we are strengthening vet integrity, lifting RTO standards and implementing stricter rules of entry to the sector. A high-performing and world-class vet sector is crucial for our country's future in so many ways. For a start, it's essential for achieving a fairer society and a stronger economy, and for producing qualified students with the skills to compete and to succeed now and in the new economy. For many decades, we have been understandably focused on the shift to a knowledge economy. In much discussion and debate, this has resulted in a competition between vet and university, between the hand and the head, between doing and thinking, as if hands and heads are somehow disconnected and we need to choose between them. Data in the employment white paper, however, paints a more nuanced picture of the trends that are shifting in the economy. The shift in employment has not been from manual to cognitive work. It has been from routine to non-routine work. High-skilled, non-routine work, both manual and cognitive, is growing, while repetitive routine work, both manual and cognitive, is declining. Thinking and doing are not in tension with each other. Together, they are far more powerful and more of what the economy needs. If we as a nation are going to meet major national challenges, such as growing the care economy, reaching net zero, responding to rapidly changing technology, and building a future made in Australia, we need education and training sectors that are fit for purpose. Vocational and education training that must be held in the same high public esteem as a university pathway, just as it is in countries like Germany and Switzerland. In Switzerland, over 60% of students take a vocational education pathway, and around half of those go on to gain a university-level qualification. The interim report of the Accord Panel Review, commissioned by my colleague Jason Clare, affirmed that we need to increase collaboration between the two tertiary sectors. Through the National Skills Agreement, I'll be seeking greater collaboration, as Minister Clare also does the same through the Accord Review. Two different vehicles, but looking to ensure greater collaboration between those two sectors. And if that wasn't always evident, you only need to look at what will be required to assist transform our economy to net zero to conclude that such collaboration must happen and it must accelerate. It shouldn't be surprising, therefore, that the first major workforce study I assigned to Jobs and Skills Australia was the Clean Energy Workforce Capacity Study. And I want to pay tribute to Professor Peter Dawkins, who's been heading up that inquiry, certainly, and been heading up that body, and has done magnificent work over the last 12 months. That study provides governments, industry and education providers with a workforce planning roadmap of the type and scale of skills that will be needed. After years of profound neglect towards skills needed for decarbonisation and net zero transformation, the task is bigger and more urgent than ever. Decarbonising will need highly skilled workers to do all the rewiring, replacing, the relocating, the reprogramming and maintaining. Having been briefed on the study, which will be released shortly by Jobs and Skills Australia, it identifies the most critical occupations comprising the clean energy workforce, including electricians, engineers and construction and production managers. Emerging occupations include solar installers, wind turbine technicians, energy auditors and energy efficiency engineers. The report outlines that the pace and complexity of the work needed for the huge job ahead will require new methods of delivering and designing curricula. This presents a significant challenge in preparing a workforce. It also presents a myriad of opportunities for the next generation of workers. Many of the jobs we'll need for our clean energy future straddle traditional trades and professions. A pilot program, for example, combines an electrical engineering degree with a Certificate 3 electrical trade apprenticeship. Federation University is planning to launch an apprenticeship with NECA to provide a Cert 3 in parallel with an electrical engineering degree. This is important work, but we need to ensure that these types of initiatives, these programs, are the norm, not the exception, which is why nationally networked TAFE centres of excellence that bring industry, universities and TAFEs together will prioritise clean energy skills along with other critical areas. These centres of excellence will help in the development of new degree apprenticeships in this field and to double the number of high apprenticeships in clean energy, in the care economy, in the IT sector within 5 years. Engaging industry and academic experts in the design and delivery of training, engaging students in emerging research to solve real-world industry problems and bridging the gap between vocational and university education. What this is all about is giving workers the depth and breadth of skills they need to meet future challenges, helping Australians to get the right skills for the jobs the economy will need. So let me be very clear. Our nation's economic, social and environmental agenda, the Albanese government's agenda, cannot be achieved without a major systemic change to the way we educate and train our people. We not only have to arrest the current skills crisis, but we must avert a future skills crisis that could have very real and profound consequences for our future national well-being. We just need to look at meeting our national security challenges. To deliver AUKUS, we'll rely on the skills of our people, and defence industries are a core example of the skills development that necessitate a focus on the hand and the head. We have to expand our sovereign workforce with skills across engineering, operations and support functions to keep building and sustaining our defence assets, whether they be land, air, ocean or space. Similarly, the $15 billion National Reconstruction Fund, led by Minister Husic, will create demand for more and different skills, providing great opportunities for good, secure jobs. So whether it's advanced manufacturing, green minerals or supply chain, then NRF will facilitate innovation that will require new ways of working and new skills. Whether it's our national security, our economic security or our environmental security, we are going to need to ensure the vet and higher education sectors work together. Skills development of our people is the foundation of every major agenda we are pursuing. As I mentioned earlier, we're finalising a new 5-year national skills agreement with states and territories. Along with the funding for Feed Free TAFE, this delivers a $13 billion investment in VET over the next 5 years. Together, we can fill skill shortages in priority areas. The goal is to achieve national stewardship, ensuring the coordination of strategic investment in skills across the economy. And I'd like to thank my counterpart state and territory ministers and acknowledge Chris Steele, who's here today as well, for their genuine cooperation in looking to rebuild national vocational education and training with TAFE at its heart. I look forward to a national skills agreement being signed before the year is out. But this cooperation hasn't always been evident. Frankly, the coalition government failed to land one national skills agreement in their 9 years in government. They just gave up or couldn't do it. Apathy and hubris meant they thought it wasn't worth the effort. So when we came to office, we found there were no agreements, not with all state and territory governments, but not even with one state or territory government. Well, we need to make sure that the national skills agreement to be signed will kickstart real change. change that makes VET what Maya Kangan and the Whitlam government intended it to be, the engine room of opportunities and an essential tool in modernising Australia's economy and society. Now, the economy and labour market of today is unrecognisable to that of the 70s, but the approach that was recommended at the time made sense then, and it makes more sense now. The agreement has several crucial elements that, when pieced together, will, I believe, revitalise the sector, ensure adequate opportunities are provided for lifelong learning and foundation skills development so Australians can skill and reskill as the economy transforms, improving completion rates of VET qualifications through better and more targeted support. A key element of our agenda is fee-free TAFE and VET places, delivered in partnership with state and territory governments. It's a flagship initiative. It was announced at the Jobs and Skills Summit last year. It was the first announcement, in fact, and it has indeed helped support key industries experiencing skill shortages, as well as providing access to those that have historically experienced barriers to training. And the numbers speak for themselves. In the first 6 months, we exceeded our target of 180,000 enrolments, with around 215,000 Australians enrolling in fee-free courses already. That's 215,000 additional people who are accessing high-quality education and training in areas that we need skilled workers, like nursing, the traditional trades, aged care, many other sectors. And we're not taking our foot off the pedal. We're funding a further 300,000 TAFE and VET fee-free places so that we can ensure that we can supply the skills that are needed. The skills to those workers, the skills to businesses who are crying out for a skilled workforce. Every time I visit a TAFE, I have to say, I meet with students who tell me how they would not have been able to study in these critical areas if the cost barriers to studying had not been lifted. So removing those cost barriers has increased the likelihood of people entering into courses which are providing skills in areas of demand. And I'm proud to be part of a Labor government that can provide these opportunities to students and industries crying out for skilled workers, to give industry the up-to-date skills that they really need. I have to also say we need to see a return to true tripartism, that governments working together with employers and unions and educators and training providers to ensure we have the complete picture of the skills industry needs. Our government's deep commitment to consultation and inclusion comes from the understanding that listening gets better answers. The 10 new Jobs and Skills Councils are a case in point. They're collecting intelligence on the needs of industry to ensure the VET sector delivers the right training outcomes for students, workers and employers. And for too long, unions have been locked out of this crucial area of our economy. We know that you get better policy outcomes when those who are affected by those policies have a seat at the table. To ensure skills and training is relevant and enduring, I've established, with the support of my state and territory colleagues, the Tripartite Qualifications Reform Design Group. For too long, we've treated the VET system as one amorphous thing rather than a diverse sector meeting the needs of different industries with widely varying attributes and needs. I've asked the group to look at how we keep the best of what we have where it's working, and how we can adopt different approaches in industries and jobs where it makes sense. Ultimately, we need to make it easier for workers to gain transferable skills so they have more mobility and more choice. Recasting vocational education and training to make it less fragmented, less rigid, and more responsive and user-friendly, so that people do not have to take years out of work to receive a new qualification, so that skills and knowledge learnt are relevant and enduring, and that people can deepen and build on those strong foundations over the course of their working lives. Now, I think everyone would agree in this room, none of this is going to be easy. In order for any of this agenda to be successful, We first have to overcome perceptions about the poor relative quality of vocational education and training in Australia. It's one of the reasons why I asked my colleague Lisa Chesters to chair a parliamentary inquiry into the perceptions and status of vocational education and training, which will report this year. The next wave of vocational education and training reforms must focus on guaranteeing integrity. The sense of drift, can I say we're serious, as I said earlier and I say again, we're serious about stamping out the unethical and badly performing training providers that tarnish the whole sector. The sense of drift regarding the vet sector is over. In August, the Skills Ministerial Council agreed to tighten the eligibility of who can run and operate a registered training organisation. Today I've announced further measures, a compliance blitz on unlawful behaviour with other government agencies and a significant boost to the capacity of the Australian Skills Quality Authority to achieve this end. The Albanese government will require ASQA to establish an integrity unit to identify and address threats to the integrity of VET and improve students' protections. A new confidential tip-off line will be established, giving a safe and confidential avenue for potential whistleblowers to alert the regulator to serious allegations of non-compliance and fraudulent practices. We'll also improve ASQA's technology to improve intelligence gathering and to more effectively detect and prevent unlawful conduct. These improvements address some of the recommendations made by Christine Nixon in her review of exploitation of Australia's visa system. They'll enhance ASQA's ability to detect and remove unlawful and non-genuine providers following a decade of inaction under the previous coalition government. Not only do we need to lift the standards of behaviour, of course, we need to lift the focus on quality to ensure students are getting the skills that they need and the economy needs. Whether that's from TAFE, from GTOs, not-for-profit industry or private providers, we need to make sure that quality is there for those students. 50 years after commissioning of the Kangan report, I'm proud to work to fulfil a great Labor aspiration for a modern vet sector. This is a generational reform agenda for our vocational education and training sector. By investing in the people and institutions that deliver the skills that workers and the economy need, we will be improving national prosperity. By getting the right people with diverse perspectives around the table in common purpose, we're focusing on the right skills and the future. By providing genuine national leadership in partnership with states and territories, we're bringing together our national, regional and local interests to embrace global opportunities. We're building a system that is greater than the sum of its parts. And in doing so, we're giving life to a great Labor vision of 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your speech. Education. Thank you for joining us as well. You talked about TAFE Centres of Excellence and about this need to revitalise that sector, improve qualifications and so forth. Are you looking at a scenario where those TAFE Centres of Excellence are actually working alongside universities because you have this vision for university level qualifications as well? Does it mean that a TAFE college in a particular city will begin cooperating with the university that's close by? Will the TAFE Centre of Excellence, should it be located on the grounds, on the campus of a university? Should they cooperate that closely?
Well, it can mean physical collaboration. And can I just start by saying there is already collaboration between the two sectors, and there's some very good examples already of the two sectors working together in order to provide skills to students. However, when I speak to heads of universities and heads of, and I'm sure Jason gets the same feedback, heads of TAFE colleges, often the collaboration is sort of fighting against the system. In other words, it doesn't lend itself to that collaboration. even though I can point to very good examples where work has been done. And although the work has been done, it is patchy, and frankly too slow given what we have to do. And it's also to disabuse people of the notion that somehow one is of a higher, one is of a lower need, in fact, or capability. The fact is this notion of skills and then a hierarchy of knowledge is a misnomer. It's not really what is being asked of here. Skills and knowledge are two sides of the same coin. We need to make sure there are plenty of jobs that require both. They do now, but we have to have an understanding that university graduates today benefit from technical skills, and technically acquired workers improve their capacity and their understanding and their career progression and so on if they have conceptual knowledge. Now that, as I say, happens now, but it's happening too slowly. So in engaging with states and territory governments, I'm talking to each of those governments and saying what centres of excellence should we establish, who should it involve, and we'll be looking to pick some of the best possible areas that we can. There's, as I say, already some nice examples. I was in Newcastle recently and I saw the Newcastle TAFE and University of Newcastle working very closely in the aviation sector, for example. So you see very good examples, but we really need to lift this and accelerate it, because we do need workers to have a composite of skills and knowledge, and that can happen if we make sure the tertiary sectors collaborate more effectively.
Okay. Our next question is from Sarah Ison.
Sarah Ison from The Australian. Thank you, Minister, for your speech. Obviously, we have a skills crisis. We also have a cost of living crisis. A lot of people are having a hard time paying their bills. Now, apprentices aren't paid all that much, and we do see a huge portion of them dropping out in that first year. For this problem, what are you going to do about it? Are more subsidies on the table? Do you see an urgency in terms of addressing, like I said, that cost of living crisis that's facing a lot of people if they're thinking about doing an apprenticeship?
Yeah. Now, look, the completion rates for apprenticeships is way too low, 55% or thereabouts. In 2012, we had 57,000 accredited trade apprenticeships completed. And by 2021, it fell by 20,000. So it's been a problem that's been around for some time, and we want to change that. We have to do that in a number of ways. I mean, you know, we want to be fiscally responsible. It's not up to taxpayers to fund every form of training where the employer is benefiting from the apprentice, but we need to target the support so it increases the likelihood of completion. The idea of just front-end loading support for apprentices, for example, is wrong. We do need to make sure we're providing support to the apprentice and, where possible, to the employer over the life of that apprentice. So we're reviewing the way we deliver support to apprentices now, apprentices and employers. We're also reviewing the support provided to apprentices by the ASINs, the support organisations that do help with maintaining apprentices staying with their apprenticeship. We're very conscious of the fact that cost of living pressures are such that we'll have people drop out to get a lesser skilled job because it's easier for them to do that. I'm very conscious of that. Removing cost barriers to paying fees is a good start. Providing access to more people undergoing traineeships, to have income contingent loans, which they never had before. For example, people in the care economy are now getting access to loans while they study, is important. Making sure we've got the right mix of support to employer and apprentice is important, and making sure the support's there. All of those things are under reform as we speak, but ultimately it's also the role of employers to, if they're looking to take on an apprenticeship, they have an obligation to see it through if they can. So we want to provide support to them, but we don't want them dropping the ball, and we'd hope to think that if an apprentice is welcome in a workplace, then it's more likely that he or she will stay. And if there's, and the final point I make in terms of retention rates, in sectors of our economy, when the apprentice can see a line of sight between the apprenticeship and a job, it is far more likely that they'll stick with the apprenticeship to get that job.
You say you're reviewing the support provided to apprentices. When will that be complete, though? And isn't it quite urgent, given that interest rates are rising now, cost of living now is
urgent.
that barrier? is there an urgency to this? When is this review going to be complete?
There is urgency, and that's why we're dealing with it now. We're internally within government working on that issue as we speak. But look at the clean energy apprenticeships, where we've doubled the support for apprentices there to encourage people to enrol. So we have with our first initiative that wasn't there before we were elected to government, we increased the support for clean energy apprenticeships. We did that to increase the likelihood of completion and also attract people to enrol. But I think the problem has been we've had a focus on commencements, not on completions, and we are looking at attending to that.
Thank you.
Next question is from Andrew Tillett.
Andrew Tillett from the Financial Review. Minister, thank you. Can I put it to you that we have, instead of a skills crisis, a people's crisis in this country? We've got, unemployment at 3.7%. We've got an ageing population, fewer workers as a consequence of that. Youth unemployment is about 8.2%. Pre-COVID, it was hovering between 12 to 14%. It's not like China where you've got 20% youth unemployed. There is just not that pool of workers out there that can be slotted in to fill these skills shortages, even with the training and the qualifications that you're saying you're doing. How much does immigration really need to do the heavy lifting in addressing this skills shortages?
Well, skill migration plays a massive role in supplying skills to our economy and always has. But it's not a binary choice, first and foremost. And as a federal government, our responsibility is to make sure we train and educate our people so they can get into jobs, particularly well-paid, secure, high-skilled jobs, and have a good career progression. That's, I think, an obligation of any government that wants to do the right thing by its citizenry. But along the way, of course, and always has been the case, as I say, we need to supply skills to our economy, our labour market, through skill migration. And of course, we've got Ministers O'Neill and Giles working on that, and soon to be released review of the skill migration pathways, because they haven't been particularly effective. Now, I pay tribute to those two ministers because they inherited 960,000 visa applications that weren't even processed, which is mind-boggling. They managed to half that application process, which means people are getting visas to stay in the labour market and economy. But a lot more work needs to be done. A lot of it has been done, and as I say, announcement is certainly due before the year's out. But I never see it as one option or the other, Andrew. I mean, I think that we need to have a very knowledgeable, skilled workforce of our own, and we need to rely on skill migration where we need to do so. I think we also we probably relied overly on temporary skill migration. If these skills are in such demand as they are often globally, we need to attract people and we need to offer them permanent skilled migration in many instances. And the Prime Minister spoke of that at the Jobs and Skills Summit, where we want to shift some of that skilled migration more towards permanent skilled migration so that they feel genuinely welcomed by the country, particularly when some of the people with those skills have options to go to comparable countries who are offering permanent migration. So there's a lot of work to be done. It's an important area, and it has to be done hand in hand with education and training investment in areas of demand. The one thing I'm happy about in terms of our own investment in education and training is it's not just giving money out as a Commonwealth government providing money. We are focusing on where the demands are now. We are working through with JSA and anticipating the areas of emerging demand, and the investment in education and training is now more commensurate with that demand than was the case. And I believe that's going to improve, because you can imagine there's a lag time between investment and outcomes for qualifications. So we really have to get a lot better of understanding our economy and labour market as to where that investment must go, whether it's university investment or the vet sector investment. And I think that's why we've established the bodies we've had, to get better understanding and anticipate more effectively what will be needed in the future through educating and training our own, and yes, skilled migration pathways that are sensitive to that demand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Given your action today on part of the Christine Nixon report, can you just, explain how concerned you are about, in vocational education and training, courses that aren't real or aren't up to scratch? I mean, clearly we need high-skilled people coming into the country, but have we got too many low-skilled people coming in, or people who are coming in and signing up for courses and not actually doing those courses at all anyway? How prevalent is that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like another life ago when I was the Minister for Immigration, and so I was seeing it from the other perspective, because if we get this wrong, we're gaming immigration and we're traducing our reputation as an education provider, because we cannot have substandard training providers who are there ostensibly to have people enrol in their courses, but they're there for other purposes, mainly allowing people to get access to the labour market. Now, we have to make sure that overseas students get access to the labour market, just like Australian students get access to labour markets when they study overseas. But we need to get rid of the bottom feeders, the dodgy providers who are not there for the genuine purpose of educating and training people. Most providers do the right thing, but there's that element. So, and the way we're tackling it has been, the approach we've taken is with Jason, Claire and I, looking at it from the education and training sectors, and you've got Ministers O'Neill and Giles working on it from the visa side. We need to make sure that we're not allowing sort of improper or issuing of visas for a purpose that it wasn't intended. And we need to do that, as I say, for all the reasons obvious. Stop the gaming of immigration, stop the traducing of our reputation as an education and training provider. So
are we talking a couple of dozen bottom feeders or, dodgy operators, or are we talking hundreds?
It happened, well, I would say probably more than a dozen, but under 100. And it's going to happen more often. It can happen with local students, but it happens more often with overseas students because they're more vulnerable to exploitation. And so the combinations of things that we've been announcing, I think will remedy some of these problems, but we'll have to monitor it. And if we need to take more action, then we'll be prepared to legislate to take more action to stop this rorting that's going on and exploiting of students, domestic or overseas.
Next question is from Monty Boval.
Monty Boval from the ABC. Thank you, Minister, for your address. I guess I want to ask about what additional levers do you think can be pulled to improve the perceptions of vocational education, particularly in schools? Do you think more needs to be done in schools to encourage it as a pathway?
I think we've all got a role in elevating the status to where it belongs. It's not, when I say it's of a lower status, it's the perception of it being a secondary option, a lesser option, is something we need to attend to. I think governments have a big role in making sure that they make clear that they see it as an equal pathway to the labour market. 9 out of every 10 future jobs will require tertiary sector education and training. Nearly half of those come from the vet sector, and we can't do without it. And you get great, well-paid, secure, skilled jobs arising from schools from the vet sector. And so governments have a role. I noticed today the Prime Minister was in Tasmania and was visiting a TAFE college. That's not the first one. I think he said he managed to visit a TAFE college in every state so far. And he's doing that because he wants to engage with the sector and wants to send a very clear message about how important the federal government sees this sector for our economy and for students and for workers. It's not to say, I think what's happened over time is there's been a view that it was not comparable to the university sector. Well, we need to disabuse people of that notion, and I think that's what we're doing. If you ask industry, they'll say they need university graduates, but they'll also in the same breath say they need, apprentices and technically trained people. So industry gets it. But yeah, can we do more? Better advice from schools, better advice so parents understand that the choices are very good. I think we can do more. But we're certainly going to continue to explain to the Australian people that you're making a very good choice if you enrol in a vet sector provider that's where you acquire skills that are in demand. That's really the key. It's whether you've got skills that are in demand and it's something you want to do. Again, I've met some TAFE students who started at university because their ATAR scores were such, or their HSC scores were such that they were told they had to go to university, only to find they didn't want to go to university, and now they were doing a trade. And it was that bias that led them to go in a direction they didn't want to go, but they were being told by everybody that was expected, that's inevitable. Well, we need to allow people to have a different view as to their options and not see one sector as lesser than the other.
Next question is from Jack Quayle.
Hi, Jack Quayle from NCA Newswire. Thanks very much for your address.
Jack.
You spoke quite a lot about the TAFE system being the heart of the vet sector, but private training providers actually are the lion's share of enrolments and actually have historically higher completion rates. I guess I'm quite interested in what you see as the future role, or the role of private training providers in the overall system, other than, I guess, this crackdown that you've announced.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, as I said at in the speech, whether it be the group training organisations, whether it's the not-for-profit industry training providers or private providers, they play a critical role. And I am very supportive of education training providers, provided that the training and education is of high quality. And that's true of TAFE too. I'm not under any illusion that everything works perfectly in TAFE colleges. They've been underfunded and in many cases obliterated in sectors. Now there's a lot of investment going in. I think there's been a return of investment by state and territory governments and certainly by the Commonwealth. But there's a lot of repair work that needs to be done in some areas of TAFE. But all of those providers, I mean, group training is a very good model obviously good model for certain circumstances with very high completion rates. Private providers, varied quality, but some very high quality private providers. And industry providers, the not-for-profit industry providers, have got a really important ingredient, because they actually understand the sector that they're working in a way that not always providers would understand. So I'm open to all of those models working with TAFE, but I say the reason why I've emphasised TAFE is we still need at the centre of this sector a very significant public provider that's working in with universities, and I think to that extent it should be at the centre of TAFE, but complemented by all the other providers I've just mentioned, provided quality is there. And if it's a quality education and training provider, then I support it.
You're setting up TAFE centres of excellence. Could a private provider set up a centre of excellence with a higher education provider? Is that a feasible scenario as well?
Well, there's definitely room for non-TAFE providers to be involved in those centres. Our focus at the moment, we're looking at, in the first instance, 6 TAFE centres of excellence, is that we're going to focus on funding those because of their scale, because there are fewer questions around propriety in terms of it being a public provider and because of its scale. But I can't see why centres of excellence won't involve non-TAFE providers. But my focus at the moment is for universities and TAFE to be working together, complemented by other providers.
Thanks. And next question is from Melissa Code.
Hi Minister, thank you for your speech.
Oh, no.
I'd like to ask a question sort of looking at the themes explored in the employment white paper as reasons why we need bigger, better, stronger, faster skilled workforce. And some of those were the needs for structural reform to address challenges like digitisation and climate. With respect to the system being greater than one small part of it, how does good childcare and making sure we have good childcare deliver on this issue of building foundational skills for the future workforce of 2050? So often we hear about the economic reasons for good childcare being women's workforce participation, very positive, but I'd love to hear it from that sort of vocational education.
Okay, well, I think we we like to mention all of what we see are clear benefits by investing in preschool education. And I hear, the Prime Minister, when he announced the policy before the election, and when we looked at increasing investment in that area, said it's a benefit all round. Starting with the child, the preschool education, it's axiomatic that a person is much better off if they're provided formal education pre-primary school, and we need to make that, I think, universal. But it also does allow for parents, in particular women, to make choices as to whether they want to re-enter the labour market. Now, right now, our employment participation rate is very high. It's not very high compared to some countries, but it's high. It's probably the highest we've had it. But there's still room to go, and I heard others say I think Andrew mentioned that we've got a labour shortage in this country. Well, that's partly true, but also we have not given opportunities to particular cohorts. I mean, they've been hitherto blocked access to the labour market, whether it's First Nations people, whether it's women in certain occupations and that have been denied opportunities or not encouraged. And so the benefit of obviously preschool education does provide women to make those choices. So I do think it's clear that if you can ensure a child acquires skills before entering primary school, if that's where we're heading, and I think we are, and if you look at the exemplar countries, the ones that are doing so well in education attainment, then you look quite often they have that investment in preschool education. So I think it's a win-win in terms of opportunity, providing the support and education for kids, ensuring that women have choices to enter the labour market. It's a win-win for the economy and for our society, and that's why we're very serious about supporting it.
And our next question is from Ben Westcott.
Hello, Minister. Ben Westcott from Bloomberg. Thank you so much for your speech. This isn't the first time that Australians have heard about a skills shortage. The Howard government unveiled a skills package in 2006. The Gillard government unveiled one in 2012. Yeah. I'm sure most journalists here would remember the Morrison government being very positive about their progress on the skills shortage, and here we are again at the pointy end where it's beginning to affect the construction industry, education, health, all sorts of things. Why will this government be different on skills?
Well, I think firstly the extent and scale of the skills shortages we inherited was almost unprecedented in the last 5 decades. So to take one example, between the years 2021-22, the occupations on the shortage list grew from 153 to 286, almost doubling in 12 months. That was a remarkable growth in shortages. The OECD reported that Australia had the second highest labour shortage per capita in the OECD countries. Upon election of the Albanese government, we uncovered that as well. So this is no ordinary skill shortage. Now, whilst you mentioned the Morrison government that preceded us, they did not reach any agreement with state and territory governments on the vet sector. That was a national agreement. And why is that a problem? Because large amounts of the investment, more than half of the investment, come from state and territory governments. If you're not working with 8 other governments to deliver to the vet sector, then I think you're already far behind. I mean, it's not just about how much money you spend, it's about how that money is spent and how coordinated that strategic investment is. And so the difference here is in my view, I think we've got a better way of identifying the needs of the labour market by the creation of Jobs and Skills Australia and 10 Jobs and Skills Councils. There was a National Skills Commission that preceded it, and I'm not reflecting poorly on them, but their remit was narrower, and it didn't involve industry or real economy insight, if I can put it that way, in the way that Jobs and Skills Australia and Jobs and Skills Councils will. So I think we've got better advice, and we're going to anticipate the changing nature of the labour market more effectively, which means the way we invest will be more effective and more capable of understanding what is needed today and tomorrow. That's obvious to me, and I think this partnership with state and territory governments, I mean, it got to the point there was billions of dollars on offer by the Morrison government to all state and territory governments, and not one jurisdiction signed an agreement with them. I mean, you can have separate jurisdictional agreements, not even the Liberal state governments signed up to that agreement, which really speaks to a failure of leadership to engage and focus on what is absolutely required in this country, which is reforms to the vet sector to deliver the skills that are needed, and do it in partnership with state and territory governments, with industry, as I said before, and having that real economy insight, I think, is also critical, that did not exist under the Howard government or Morrison government.
Do we know why some of those apprentices are dropping out, is it basically because of the wage being too low? And is that the number one target for change if you want to keep apprentices in courses and get more skilled workers?
Yeah, that's probably that's obviously a significant
So
issue.
people are going to have to pay more for their plumber or their electrician or something, because otherwise there's not going to be something in it for the tradesperson to get the skill.
Well, look, they are very, very attractive occupations, right? The difficulty is, how does a trade apprentice endure the apprenticeship on the money they're on? But it's not just the money, but I think that's a key issue. Support for the apprentice, to me, is the biggest issue. But not just money, how they're treated in the workplace, how they're welcomed in workplaces is a really important part. How they're mentored, are they getting support? How are they being treated? And you can hear the more extreme, awful examples of the way apprentices are treated when they go to a workplace. So the workplace has to be welcoming, the support has to be targeted, but equally, I mean, we're looking to do this in a fiscally responsible way. We can't just keep increasing taxpayers' money to fix this alone. And it's more complex than just money, but obviously money is part of it. And so we need to work at how do we afford to do that, but also how do we make sure they get the support that's not just monetary, it's also other forms of support. And as I said at the tail end of an earlier question, wherever possible, if you can guarantee or increase the likelihood that someone will be employed after his or her apprenticeship, it is much more likely that they will complete that apprenticeship if they know there's a job at the end of it.
Next question is from Dominic Giannini.
Hey Minister, thanks for that. Dominic Giannini from Australian Associated Press. I wanted to ask about accessibility in the TAFE sector. So the TAFE and People with Disabilities report from the Human Rights Commission found that resources are very thinly spread, programs are overly dependent on individual efforts of teachers, most special courses do not have vocational outcomes, linkages between schools at one end of the spectrum and job placement and support at the other end are poorly developed. So how do you make the TAFE sector more inclusive and more accessible for people with disabilities and tap into that vein and bring unemployment down in that sector?
Well, that's a good question, and it will take time to make sure that the TAFE sector or the vet sector is responsive to cohorts that I don't think have been given enough opportunities. Now, we talk about the lack of access to the labour market, but so too often the lack of access to education and training providers. And so I'm open to any ideas that's going to encourage the likelihood of people with disability to get opportunities to acquire skills. I am happy to say that there's been a pretty significant take-up of fee-free TAFE from people who are recognise themselves with having a disability, and that's quite a significant enrolment proportion of the 215,000 places. So that's encouraging. And again, you can imagine there'll be people with disabilities that will have cost barriers to enrolling, with all the other costs that they may have to consider. And removing the fees, it is clear on what I've received to date in terms of the enrolments of people with disability that they are more likely to enrol today than they were when there were significant fees to those courses. But I don't think that's the end of it. I heard what you said in the question. We need to make sure that they feel that they're being supported and welcomed in TAFE or other vet providers. And I'm very happy to talk to the representatives and advocates of people with disability to improve that if we can, and talk to state and territory counterparts about that.
Our last question is from Nick Stewart.
Can I follow Dominic's question up? You talked about the mainstreaming. Does this mean that people with disability will be given particular support in TAFE as to allow them to continue into the mainstream, or will there be separate courses for them? If there are separate courses, do you see that as being a positive thing, so that disability support providers like, for example, Aruma, which already run TAFE courses for their own staff, so that people like that, organisations like that, can in fact work on giving people with disability skills as well as the normal TAFE system?
Well, I think it shouldn't be one or the other. I think where their circumstances are such that it would be better for people with disabilities to engage in a course, then that's fine. But there'll be many who would rather and are able and wanting to enrol in a generic course to acquire skills so that they can find a job in the labour market. And so I don't think it's one over the other. I think we can do both, and we should. But my main point is that, and I said this earlier, and I think people in this, everyone understands this, the labour market's very tight, right? So we have to do a lot of things, including skilled migration. But the other opportunity of a tight labour market is making sure that people who have hitherto been locked out of the labour market are given access to that labour market. And employers, and I know I've spoken to a number of employers who have rethought their prospective employees and are now more amenable to employing particular cohorts of people that they perhaps hitherto had not contemplated. So this is an opportunity, an opportunity to give people a chance who haven't been given chances. And I think that's not just a social good, but in the circumstances that we confront, an economic imperative. And that includes people with disability.
On that note, we'll wrap up. Thank you very much for your speech today. I would like to present you with a membership card for the National Press Club, because we're all welcome again to hear from you on the same subject. Thank you for christening the new room. We should have given you a bottle of champagne. You could have broken it over the lectern. It's a sold-out day today. Thank you for being with us. Please join me in thanking Brendan O'Connor.
Thanks, David. Thanks very much. Thanks for having you.